I've learned tonight she was a 19-year-old student from Japan studying in Toronto. Authorities say she stood up on a railing while holding an umbrella and lost her balance. She was 80 feet from the brink of the Horseshoe Falls.
Okay. I wish I had said something.
On August 14, 2011, Niagara Falls, 19-year-old Japanese student Ayano Tokumasu leaned over a safety railing, holding an umbrella, trying to snap the perfect photo. In seconds, she lost her balance and plunged over the 180-foot Horseshoe Falls. What began as a casual sightseeing trip ended in an international tragedy, raising urgent questions about safety and the hidden dangers behind tourist attractions. Here are some of the worst Niagara Falls deaths caught on record.
Like thousands of tourists every day, a young woman was just having her picture taken with Niagara Falls in the background last evening, and then she slipped. Senior correspondent Rich Newberg has the latest on this bizarre tragedy. Rich?
Niagara Falls draws millions every year, but in August 2011, it claimed the life of a young international student in a way that left witnesses shaken and authorities issuing urgent warnings. Ayano Tokumasu, a 20-year-old Japanese student studying English at Toronto's Hansa Language Center, visited the falls with a friend on August 14th. Like many tourists, she wanted the perfect photo, but what started as a casual pose quickly turned deadly.
She was sitting sort of right here. She had one leg on either side, straddling this post.
Okay. I wish I had said something.
Ayano straddled the railing at Table Rock, holding an umbrella. Witnesses watched as she attempted to stand up and climb back over. Suddenly, she lost her balance. In an instant, Ayano was swept into the raging waters, just 20 meters upstream from the Horseshoe Falls, the most powerful waterfall in North America.
I've learned tonight she was a 19-year-old student from Japan studying in Toronto. Authorities say she stood up on a railing while holding an umbrella and lost her balance. She was 80 feet from the brink of the Horseshoe Falls.
Okay. I wish I had said something.
The drop from that point is nearly 57 meters, almost 200 feet straight down into the turbulent Niagara River below. With the fall's incredible force, rescue was impossible. Witnesses could only watch in horror as Ayano disappeared into the mist and roar of the falls.
Just like driving this thing around there, and then all of a sudden everybody started screaming, like yelling. They're like, look, look, look. So I looked, and as soon as I was over there so you can see the edge, and she just like, phoom.
Parks employee Daniel Ramos recalled the crowd's sudden screams, a wave of panic and disbelief that rippled through the onlookers as they realized in horror what was happening before their eyes.
I've been in policing here for 35 years, and I don't recall anybody accidentally falling over that railing in my 35 years of service here, so it's pretty rare.
Niagara Parks Police Chief Doug Kane, with over 3 decades of experience, said accidental falls over that railing are extremely rare, emphasizing how unusual and tragic this incident was. He added that Ayano's umbrella may have contributed to her losing balance, but regardless, the consequences were fatal.
If you decide, if you're a young adult and you choose to climb over a restraining barrier, unfortunately, there's consequences. In this case, they were tragic.
Authorities immediately classified the incident as a tragic accident. They reviewed surveillance footage from the visitor center, which confirmed Ayano's fatal misjudgment. The footage shows her straddling the railing, then losing her balance as she tries to climb back over.
She was hanging onto an umbrella at the time, and that may have had something to do with taking her off balance.
The search for Ayano's body began immediately. Helicopters scoured the Niagara River below the falls, while rescue teams scanned the area. The powerful currents made recovery efforts extremely dangerous and complicated. For days, there was no sign of Ayano. The river's relentless flow, combined with the fall's immense force, made it seem like her body might never be found. But on August 18th, 4 days after the accident, an employee at the Cave of the Winds attraction on the U.S. side spotted something in the water.
And back to the woman who went over the railing. Niagara Parks police, who have surveillance video, said the incident was a tragic accident. Authorities are working with the Japanese Consulate General to notify the victim's family.
The body was recovered about 30 meters below the tourist attraction. New York State Park Police confirmed it was Ayano Tokumasu. The tragic confirmation brought closure to the search, but nothing could undo the devastating consequences of a single moment's decision.
Ma'am, can you come down, please? I can't be on the wall. All right.
Today, Ayano's story serves as a stark reminder of the dangers that lurk behind seemingly harmless actions. Every year, tourists still try to capture the perfect photo, ignoring safety barriers that exist for a reason. But Ayano's fate shows just how quickly things can turn tragic. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy. It became a warning etched into Niagara's history. Signs and warnings increased around the falls, but ultimately, safety comes down to personal responsibility. The barriers are there, but so is temptation. Ayano's story is a permanent reminder of what can happen when those barriers are ignored. Ayano Tokumasu's final moments at the edge of the falls were heartbreaking, yet hers was not the only life claimed by the waters. Another came years later when a man made a fatal leap into the same torrent.
Well, good evening, everyone. Dozens of daredevils look to conquer the mighty cataract, but only a handful survive.
Kirk Jones did survive a plunge over the Horseshoe Falls in 2003, but his second attempt recently ended in death.
Kirk Jones was no stranger to Niagara Falls. In 2003, he became the first person to survive the mighty plunge without any protective device. But in April 2017, he returned for one final, fatal attempt, this time with a bizarre twist involving an inflatable ball and a 7-foot boa constrictor named Misty. Before we get into the details of that final stunt, let's rewind to the start of Jones's dangerous fascination with Niagara Falls. In October 2003, after losing his job and reaching a financial low point, Jones made his first attempt. He left just $30 and a note for his family, telling them he felt like the loneliest man in the world. What followed next would make him infamous. Friends and family later revealed he'd been obsessed with the idea of surviving a jump from the falls for years, convinced there was a specific spot that could make it possible.
It was a glassy, surreal experience, and so loud and thunderous, and a lot of pressure upon my head as I was forced out, and I don't know how fast, but it seemed like 100 miles an hour.
That first jump left Jones battered but alive. He landed feet first, was pulled 40 to 50 feet underwater, but somehow managed to resurface and crawl onto the rocks below. His survival wasn't just luck. Some experts believe a water cone, formed by pressurized air, cushioned his fall. Others saw it as a miracle. At first, Jones claimed depression drove him to the stunt, but he later admitted that it was only to avoid fines, saying,
"I understand what I did was wrong. You will never see an action in Niagara waters with my name written on it again."
He was fined $5,000 and banned from Canada. Despite claiming he'd never attempt such a feat again, Jones found himself drawn back to the falls. After a failed attempt to profit from his fame through circus contracts and speaking engagements, it seemed he couldn't escape the pull of Niagara's power. 14 years would pass before Kirk Jones made his fateful return to Niagara Falls. This time, he wasn't alone. He planned to go over the edge inside a 10-foot inflatable ball, holding his beloved pet snake, Misty. He even created a website to promote the stunt and sell t-shirts.
New York State Parks Police tell 7 Eyewitness News they believe Florida resident Kirk Jones and a friend came to the edge of Niagara Falls on April 19th to perform a stunt using this inflatable plastic ball. Police believe Jones was intending to go over the falls holding a 7-foot pet boa constrictor named Misty, something investigators found Jones was promoting on his website where he was trying to sell these t-shirts.
But things quickly unraveled. The friend who accompanied Jones that day grew nervous and backed out. What happened next remains a mystery. The ball went over the falls empty, and Misty the snake vanished. Weeks later, Jones's body was discovered 12 miles downstream in the Niagara River. Investigators recovered Jones's minivan and a crashed drone from Goat Island. The drone's footage offered no clues. just 2 minutes of rapids before it lost control and crashed. Authorities believe Jones either fell out or exited the ball before reaching the brink.
We heard that they found the body and that they pulled some kind of a ball out of the water. That's when we said, oh my God, that's the ball we saw going in the water. And that was the first we ever would dream that anybody was in that ball.
The Bastians immediately contacted Parks Police after learning there was a connection to the picture they took.
They had theories about that he'd been in it but got out above the falls, but we don't know that anything for sure. It's part of history of different things, and hopefully somebody will not do that again.
With his tragic end, Kirk Jones became the 9th daredevil to die at Niagara Falls. His story serves as a grim reminder of the fall's deadly power and the seduction of its challenge. Despite his initial survival, Jones ultimately paid the price for tempting fate once too often. But even in death, Jones's story wasn't finished. When his family refused to claim his remains, the community stepped in. Tim Baxter of Oakwood Cemetery arranged a proper burial among other famous daredevils who challenged the falls.
Baxter helped coordinate the donation of a plot and headstone, which is now in place.
Jones now rests in what locals call the stunter section, a fitting final chapter for a man whose life was defined by his obsession with Niagara Falls. His grave stands not just as a memorial, but as a warning to anyone tempted by the fall's deadly allure. State Parks Police emphasized that it was Jones's reckless actions that caused his death, and they put that out as a reminder and warning to others who may be thinking of doing something similar. Kirk Jones's attempt at the falls ended in disaster, but years earlier, another man had already tried a stunt of his own, and it cost him his life in front of stunned onlookers. October 1st, 1995, was a day that began with hope and daring, but would end with tragedy. Robert Overacker's plan seemed brilliant. Ride a single jet ski directly into the Horseshoe Falls, then deploy a rocket-propelled parachute at the final moment to glide safely to the river below. With hundreds watching from both shores, the 39-year-old Californian put everything on the line for this stunt. He entered the Niagara River near the Canadian power plant, accelerating through the turbulent upper rapids. The crowd's excitement built with every passing second. His brother and a close friend watched from a safe distance, barely breathing as he neared the deadly drop. Just as Overacker reached the brink, he triggered the rocket-powered parachute strapped to his back, the moment everyone had been waiting for. But instead of deploying, the parachute package separated from his body. Unbeknownst to Overacker, a critical error in packing meant he hadn't secured the chute to his harness, which meant there was nothing to catch his fall. The crowd's cheers turned to horrified screams as he disappeared over the 170-foot drop, untethered and helpless against gravity's pull. What followed was pure chaos. Onlookers screamed in disbelief as Overacker and his jet ski plummeted separately into the churning abyss. For a brief moment, it appeared he might have survived, his arms flailing in the rapids below, creating an illusion of movement. But the cold reality set in quickly. Maid of the Mist staff recovered his lifeless body from the turbulent water moments later. Niagara General Hospital confirmed the obvious. Robert Overacker was dead. He became the 15th person since 1901 to intentionally go over Niagara Falls in or on a device, and one of the most tragic. Married but childless. His dream of making history ended in a nightmare. But the story doesn't end with his fatal plunge. The aftermath raised serious questions about safety protocols, stunt preparation, and the psychological mindset that drives individuals to challenge nature's deadly power. The world watched in horror, and authorities were forced to confront the growing trend of extreme stunts at Niagara. Overacker's death marked a turning point in daredevil history at the falls. His fatal mistake wasn't just a technical error. It exposed the thin line between calculated risk and reckless endangerment. Park officials immediately tightened security and surveillance along the river, determined to prevent similar tragedies. But Overacker's failed stunt isn't just about safety measures or crowd control. It serves as a reminder that even the most meticulous plans can fall apart with a single overlooked detail. Today, the spot where Overacker began his fateful journey remains unchanged. The river still churns toward the brink, oblivious to the lives it has claimed. His story stands as a permanent warning. Nature always has the final say. No amount of technology or preparation can guarantee survival against such raw elemental force. In the end, Robert Overacker's greatest legacy isn't the stunt he attempted. It's the sobering reality of human vulnerability in the face of nature's power. His final moments, captured forever on tape, serve as a haunting reminder that some challenges are simply not meant to be conquered. Robert's stunt ended in tragedy, but he was not the first to challenge the falls. Decades earlier, another man stepped forward, determined to prove himself against the raging waters.
Riverman William Hill looks over his rubber barrel made of 14 tubes bound with fishnet, which he believes will take him safely over Niagara Falls.
August 5th, 1951, William Red Hill Jr. stood on the banks of the Niagara River, his gaze fixed on the roaring Horseshoe Falls downstream. The air around Niagara Falls was thick with tension and anticipation as thousands gathered to witness his most dangerous stunt yet. At 38, the weight of his father's legacy pressed heavily on his shoulders. Red Hill Sr. had become a local legend by pulling more than 170 bodies from these waters and making daring rescues. But it was his father's record that his son could never quite match. And today, Red Jr. planned to outdo him in the most dangerous way possible.
Taking his last look at this world, Hill climbs in.
He called it The Thing, a homemade contraption made of 13 heavy-duty inner tubes, lashed together with canvas webbing and wrapped in fishnet. Painted silver, it looked more like a death trap than a life-saving device. But Hill had a purpose beyond personal glory. He needed money for his struggling family and hoped to raise funds for a memorial to his late father. At 1:30 p.m., The Thing was launched from Usher's Creek about 2 miles upstream. By 3:30, the current pulled it through the upper rapids toward the 160-foot drop. Tens of thousands lined the banks, watching in tense silence as history prepared to repeat itself, just not in the way Red Jr. hoped.
And the barrel is towed towards the falls, at the foot of which Hill's brothers wait in a boat.
William Hill's final moments were shrouded in spray and thunder. The barrel approached the edge, disappeared over the brink, and vanished into the mist. For a moment there was hope. Perhaps his father's luck would hold. But then the battered remains of The Thing surfaced, empty.
Hurried along by the swift current, the barrel hurtles over the 160-foot falls.
Panic spread through the crowd as his family and brothers searched desperately. The silence was shattered by Hill's mother's frantic cries. His wife and 10-year-old daughter joined the grim vigil, while his brothers scoured the river below. The next morning, workers found William Red Hill Jr.'s body near the Maid of the Mist dock. The falls had done their work. The lower half of his body badly mangled, a deep gash across his forehead. The family's legend had ended in tragedy.
But only the battered barrel comes to the surface.
But the story didn't end there. Public outrage followed, not just over the loss, but over the needless risk. Ontario's Premier Leslie Frost immediately issued an order. Anyone attempting such stunts would now face arrest. This marked the beginning of strict anti-stunting laws around Niagara Falls, a direct result of the Hill family's tragic legacy. William Red Hill Jr. was buried at Fairview Cemetery in Niagara Falls, joining his father in death, as he had tried so desperately to match him in life. The family's daring exploits had finally reached their tragic conclusion, but their impact on Niagara's history would last forever.
Hill's brother vows to go over the falls himself to conquer the jinx that killed his brother.
William Red Hill Jr.'s fatal plunge marked the end of a legendary family's daring legacy and the beginning of a safer, more regulated Niagara Falls. His story remains a powerful reminder that nature's fury always claims the final victory, no matter how brave the challenger. William Jr.'s stunt showed the deadly power of the falls. But not every life lost here came from daring. Some were from despair, like the young woman who jumped to end her own life.
And our top story tonight at 6, a mother and her 2 children are dead tonight after police say they went over a guardrail and into the rapids over Niagara Falls.
It's the kind of story that stops time. On October 28, 2024, at Niagara Falls, a mother and her 2 children crossed a line that no one was prepared for. The woman, 33-year-old Chianti Means, stepped over the safety rail at Luna Island with her 5-month-old baby, Mecca Means, and 9-year-old son, Roman Rossman. What followed was a tragedy that left an entire community searching for answers.
We also know that this all started around 9 p.m. on Monday when the mother, 33-year-old Chianti Means, and her 2 kids, one 9 years old and the other just 5 months old, crossed over that safety railing at Luna Island.
Chianti wasn't just another tourist at the falls. She lived nearby with her children. By all accounts, she was a domestic violence counselor, someone who dedicated her life to helping others. But that night something changed. Surveillance footage showed her at the falls, pushing a stroller with her infant and holding her son's hand. Witnesses say she looked determined, not distressed. There was no sign of hesitation as she approached the rail. Police later found her vehicle parked nearby, with personal items left behind. The investigation quickly determined this wasn't an accident. Trooper James O'Callahan of the New York State Police made it clear.
It's not something where they just stumbled in.
The barriers at Luna Island are designed to keep people safe, but Chianti deliberately bypassed them. Police believe the 9-year-old went first, followed by Means and her infant daughter. It happened quickly, almost quietly, despite being in one of the most visited tourist spots in the world. There were no cries for help, no last-minute attempts to stop. Just a mother and her children disappearing into the powerful waters of Niagara.
Investigation. Police do tell us, though, that the family has been very cooperative throughout this process and are really now just trying to find some closure for them. And that's why, as we speak, there are still rescue crews in the waters below us here trying to find any remains. But Scott and Mary Alice, 48 hours into this search, they still have not found anything.
Rescue crews searched for days, but the river kept its secrets. The bodies were never recovered. The family, still cooperative with investigators, could only wait for closure that never came. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the act itself, but the complete absence of warning signs. Friends and family later revealed Chianti had been struggling. Social media posts showed a woman in pain, longing for her family to be whole again. But there were no clear indicators of what she planned that night at the falls. Authorities called it an intentional act, but stopped short of labeling it a murder-suicide without definitive evidence. The investigation continues, but the why remains elusive. Chianti Means wasn't just another statistic. She was a mother, a counselor, someone who helped others escape darkness. In her final act, she took her children with her into the abyss of Niagara. Chianti Means' death showed how despair can lead someone to the edge of the falls, and that sometimes the most dangerous waters are the ones we can't see. But tragedy has also struck in sudden, unexpected ways, when an ordinary boat ride turned into a fight for survival. If you or someone you know is struggling, help is available. The Suicide and Crisis Services hotline is always open.
Perhaps most famous for surviving the plunge, 7-year-old Roger Woodward. He was boating with his sister and another man in July of 1960 when their boat capsized, throwing them into the rough upper rapids. His sister was pulled to safety just feet from the brink of the Horseshoe Falls, but Roger was swept over with just a life jacket protecting him from the elements.
July 9th, 1960. The warm sun blazed over the Niagara River as a peaceful boat ride turned into a nightmare just above the mighty falls. Jim Honeycutt, a construction foreman, had promised the Woodward parents their kids would wear life jackets. 7-year-old Roger, in a bright orange vest, steered the aluminum boat with excitement as his older sister Deanne watched. The river's current grew stronger. They passed under the Grand Island Bridge, which is usually a turnaround point for cautious boaters. But Honeycutt, aiming for adventure, pressed on. As their small craft neared a sandbar, the outboard engine caught a submerged rock. The propeller's death scream echoed as the motor died, leaving them at the mercy of the rapids. Panic set in. Honeycutt grabbed the oars, but the current was too strong. He shouted for Deanne to put on the spare life jacket, the last heroic act of a man who realized too late the danger they faced. A wave smashed the boat. Deanne rushed to buckle the jacket. Roger screamed, "Dee Dee, we're gonna die." A second wave capsized them all. The river now claimed control. Deanne, a strong swimmer, fought toward Goat Island. 2 vacationers, John Hayes and John Quattrocchi, saw her struggle. Without hesitating, Hayes climbed over the guardrail, risking his own life to reach her. Quattrocchi joined, their combined strength enough to pull Deanne from the swirling death, only 4 meters from the brink. Roger's struggle was different. The river's force swept him away from shore. He thrashed, screamed for help, and saw people running toward Deanne. No one could reach him.
I was angry because I was screaming as loud as I could for help, and nobody would do anything,
Roger would later recall. As the falls drew closer, anger faded to surrender. Cold and exhaustion gripped the 55-pound boy.
I realized I was going to die.
Roger remembered.
I thought about my dog, my toys, my mom and dad, and there was just total peace.
Roger entered what he called the cloud, the 167-foot drop over Horseshoe Falls. Engulfed in mist, he had no sense of falling. Then, silence. His world exploded as he hit the pool below. The adult-sized life jacket forced him to the surface, battered but alive. Through the spray, he saw a huge boat, the Maid of the Mist 2. Captain Clifford Keach, returning from a tour, had heard the cry for help. 3 times they threw the life ring. On the 3rd attempt, Roger's small hands grasped it. The crew pulled him aboard, shivering and in shock. His first words were for his sister's safety and a request for water. Meanwhile, Deanne recovered in a Niagara Falls, New York hospital. She learned her brother had survived, a miracle that still echoes through time. Jim Honeycutt wasn't so fortunate. His body surfaced 3 days later near the Maid of the Mist landing. His insistence on life jackets had saved a life, but not his own. For years, the Woodward family rarely spoke of that day. But as time passed, Roger found meaning in his survival. In 1990, returning to Niagara Falls, he declared,
"It wasn't the hand of fate, it wasn't the hand of luck. It was the spirit of the living God that saved my life and my sister's that day."
Today, Roger Woodward's name stands as the youngest person to survive Niagara Falls. His story is one of terror and triumph of how a life jacket, quick-thinking heroes, and sheer willpower turned what should have been a tragedy into one of the most remarkable survival tales in Niagara's long, storied history. The boat incident left lasting memories of both loss and survival. But the river wasn't done making history. Years later, another tragedy struck when a car went over the falls, with its driver still inside.
This is a tragic situation we've been following all afternoon for you. One woman is dead after her car plunged into the Niagara River, crews risking their lives to pull her from the vehicle.
December 8th, 2021. Snow fell gently over the Niagara River as emergency radios crackled with urgency. Police patrols rushed toward the American Falls, their vehicles skidding slightly on the icy roads. What they found was a black sedan, partially submerged, caught in the roaring current just 50 yards from the brink. The driver, a woman in her 60s, was already motionless. Witnesses reported seeing her car floating downstream, but now only the roof and open trunk hatch poked above the freezing water. The river current was too powerful, and the water temperature was deadly. Local swiftwater teams were helpless against the force of nature. The New York State Parks Police Captain Chris Rolla explained the situation, his breath visible in the cold air.
Our swiftwater team was not able to make a recovery. We contacted the Coast Guard, and their helicopter and rescue swimmer came out and was able to make a recovery of that operator.
Above the raging river, a red Coast Guard helicopter hovered precariously close to the mist-wreathed falls. Petty Officer Second Class Darian Duryea prepared for the most dangerous mission of his career. He was lowered by cable, fighting against the icy wind and water.
So, police called in the U.S. Coast Guard, which lowered a Coast Guard member to the vehicle to recover the body inside.
As I was coming down, I was just really focused on how I was going to get in this car when there were, pretty much rapids coming over it right next to Niagara Falls. Duryea later recalled. The car's doors were unlocked, a small mercy. Duryea managed to open the passenger side, bracing against the current. He found the woman inside, already beyond help. Carefully, he secured her for recovery.
Leah, New York State Police say they received a call just before noon about a car in the Niagara River. About 2 hours later, we were here as a U.S. Coast Guard member recovered a body from the vehicle. We know now that driver was a woman in her late 60s.
Witnesses watched in stunned silence as the Coast Guard lifted both Duryea and the victim from the treacherous waters. The entire operation was completed in minutes, but it felt like an eternity. The investigation began immediately. Roads had been slippery that morning, but there was no clear evidence of how the car entered the river. Some speculated about suicide, others about a tragic accident. The truth might never be known.
However, investigators say it's unclear how the vehicle got into the water.
Emergency crews determined the vehicle's removal would require careful planning. The river's current remained relentless even as daylight faded and rescue lights illuminated the scene. Kathy Hochul, New York's governor, mourned the tragic loss while praising the swift and heroic actions of emergency crews. Captain Rolla called the Coast Guard's work incredible and acknowledged the unprecedented danger they faced. This incident marked the closest a vehicle had ever come to going over the American Falls. It showcased the power of the Niagara Falls, which had been unyielding, and its victims came from all walks of life. The woman's identity remained private, her family notified, but shielded from public scrutiny. The black sedan, battered by the current, waited for recovery as darkness fell over the mist-shrouded river. Over the years, countless lives have been lost to its waters, each story different but equally haunting. Which one struck you the most? Don't forget to like, comment, and follow for more chilling stories like these.